Well, I think the day has come. This little 1.3 liter Kubota Turbo has done me well. I got the thing off of Craigslist for $1,000 with about 160 run hours on it, and something had happened to it. It was a marine diesel genset that had the generator head bolted right off the flywheel. So I had gotten a stub shaft made and converted it into the belt-driven generator skid that was on a different video. We'll go out there in a second. But I started loading it down too much, and I had to progressively shrink the size of that drive pulley right there to the point where I was running this thing at 2,400 RPM. And while it's rated for that, I just didn't like it. And because I didn't have an electronic governor on it, there used to be one, but whatever accident happened down right here, the guy that sold it to me either took it off and kept it, or that got damaged or something. So I didn't have one. So I just had a fixed governor set screw right there, and it did okay. But if it got loaded down too much, it would just kind of fail. Having said that, it's got this cute little turbo on it, and it did well for a while. I had a little bit of leakage on this old hose right here, but that's another story. Fun part was that it's a wet manifold, and so I ran it through a radiator, and I'll show you that in just a second. It does turn out also that there was this bypass right here required. So from the oil pump, it had to go out to an external oil filter, and I put a cooler on it too, just because. And it did me well for, I don't know, I probably only ran the thing 500 hours, and it was doing fine until I just got to the point where I just got kind of fed up that I had to be really careful about what loads I put on it, and it was just clearly undersized. And I gave this thing a quarter turn on the fuel screw, so I gave it a little more fuel, and even despite that, it was just too much. I was pushing it too hard, and so I talked to this Amish friend of mine who runs diesel power systems in Christiana PA, and he said, Michael, you need to have you really need a 5.9. They're a Cummins shop, and he said, but I can't build you one for probably another 6 to 9 months. But if you come over and you want to help out nights and weekends, and do most of the work rebuilding one of the ones that I have on the shelf, then we might be able to do it sooner. So I took him up on it right away. Went over to spend a few Saturdays, a few longer evenings over there at his shop, and we got it done. So today's the day for that. Just wanted to show you kind of where we came from. It's a cute little engine, but it's and it has a purpose, certainly, but not what I was asking of it. So anyway, let's walk out to where the diesel skid is. So this is on the outside of my shop, and this is what the Amish call a diesel skid. And it's like back in the olden days, then a lot of workshops were run off of line shafts. And so this is basically a line shaft setup to where I've got the diesel, which this is where that Kubota was sitting. I have a single phase generator, I have a 3-phase generator, and I have an air compressor. So off of one engine, I'm running 3 different things. And a lot of men will put a hydraulic pump or like a separate alternator for battery charging, etc. But pretty common setup with the Amish. I really liked it, so a friend of mine and I built this, and it's worked great. And but since that little Kubota took up a lot less room, my original configuration was I had it sitting over here, and the single phase generator was this way, with the drive end of that generator facing this way. That's what these slots were here for. But because this 5.9 is significantly bigger, I would have had some interference here. And so I had to reconfigure things. And so I moved the single phase generator over that way, which doesn't care which way you spin it. And I took the air compressor, which was over there, still facing that way. And then I had to take it here and put it on this side of the skid. And I had to make a new platform for it. So a lot of reconfiguration. And the big thing was that it was heavy. And I had I'd already built myself one crane for this side of the skid, and that's up here, to where I would just take I take the window out, and then with the pallet forks just come in and put. The reason I needed it was this 700-pound larger 3-phase generator head. I put that through the window, and then I just ran my my crane. I've got a little hoist, rather, right there in a trolley, and ran it up here, picked it up off the pallet forks, and then just ran it over here, just here on up underneath that gantry crane, set it in place, and we're off to the races. But that little engine was small enough to where 2 men could just manhandle the thing, and we just moved it around, and it was perfectly fine. With this, this is 1,100 pounds here, this Cummins. Actually, probably more. This might be 1,200 to 1,300 pounds, because it also has a wet manifold. And anyway, I'll show you the engine in just a second. So anyway, I had to build a second gantry crane up here to go near the door. And that's what I used to get, I stuck the pallet forks in this way through the door. And so I just had the engine kind of right here in the doorway, hoisted it up, and I moved it this, 5 or 6 feet over to set it in place. And actually I used it a good bit to lift it up and to adjust it when I needed to move things around. But I had to add another piece of C-channel here onto the skid just so that it would hit right. And then I had to cut my slots in it, and cut the slots, or I'm sorry, drill the holes for the those 5/8 bolts to go through. And anyway, here's a center shot of the skid and the line shaft. And I had, yeah, that is probably up to the skid. So I'd come in through the wall here with all the wiring for the generator head and for the diesel. So the diesel comes up through here, and I made a little bracket. Well, you probably can't see it. Get over there. Made a little bracket here to hold the wiring in place, so I could put these tube clamps on it. And just found a metric bolt that fit into the block there. So that's all neat and tidy. I'm going to finish the rest of this up once I'm convinced that it's all wired properly. But yeah, got it all wired up. Got my air cleaner. And so this is the wet manifold right here. And which also there's a heat jacket, a water jacket around the turbo on this variant. And so then what you get is, before the thermostat opens up, then the engine actually comes up to temperature a lot faster, because you actually capture the heat from the exhaust, put it back into the block, and it gets warm. Then when the thermostat opens, then you continue to capture the heat, obviously. But the good thing is that you could use that heat for a marine application. Then of course they just want to dump it in the ocean, or you could use it for cabin heating or whatever. But here, which is also very common with the Amish, which they run their diesels 8 to 10 hours a day because they power a lot of their shops. So that's waste heat that they're all really big on capturing. So there's a well-developed science around heat transfer, which I think is fantastic. And so that's what I did. The cooling system that I'm using is not just a radiator. I do have a radiator, but what a lot of them do, and I happen to have in place already, so I did, was I'm running the heat into the floor in my shop. And since I don't need to run this all the time, this is just for battery charging, or if I have a really big load that I need to run that's more than my inverters will take, then I'll crank up this generator and then I'll run it intermittently, basically. And I'll run it more in the winter than in the summer by far. So that's when I want the heat. And so basically this is the hot supply that will go up into the shop, and it goes up here, and then there's a T right here, and it can go through, I've got a valve there if I want it to, but it can go here through this radiator, which really is just a backup. So it goes in the radiator, back out, cooler, and then so this is the cold return that comes either back from the radiator or also primarily from the shop floor. And I've got on the return side, I have this aquastat here so that when the return water is past, I'm going to pick it, I got to play with it, but call it like, 150 degrees, maybe 140, then that will, through a relay down there, will turn those fans on. Otherwise, it may just circulate some through there. But primarily, the cooling takes place in my shop floor, which is a 3,600 square foot by 5-inch concrete pad. So, which is a big heat sink. And there are some applications where they'll run PEX pipe out in a meadow or something. And they'll do like 1,000 feet of PEX pipe. And there's no radiator, and there's no moving parts, no maintenance. And the water just, it goes out through a big loop that they trench in, like up underneath the cornfield or something, and comes back cool and goes back out again. So anyway, from here, then the let's see, where are we? Yeah. So here's the hot supply that goes out here, and I've got two air traps up there, and so those two go into my mechanical room. And yes, this is my greenhouse also. So my intention is to heat the greenhouse with the diesel. But then it comes into the mechanical room here, and that's the cold return for the boiler. So the cold from the floor, so here's the manifolds down there. The cold from the floor comes back up, that red PEX pipe that you can see, kind of like right there. And so the cold will go back to the diesel that way. And then the hot comes in this way, and then it goes up and out to the boiler. So it runs to the boiler first, which will kind of pre-cool it. You don't want more than 150 degree water going into your radiant system. And this is where the hot comes down. So assuming that you run the diesel for several hours, then the boiler itself will eventually heat up, even though it's not running. And then the hot water comes in here, goes through the mixing valve and into the circulators. So I have the circulators also on another relay to where they will turn on when the ignition circuit for the diesel is on. So I force them to run too. I mean, the water pump in the diesel is strong, but I want to give it some assistance with the circulators. And so that's how it works. Comes back cool. All right. And now's the moment I've been waiting for a very long time. Let me zoom that back out. this time. I'm going to do one last check and be right back. We're going to start it. I lied. One other thing that I wanted to mention over on this side, the drive end. Okay, so I'm on this side. The drive end. I have this, I'm going to run this thing slow. The intention is like 850 RPM. And because I mean, if I got 50 or 60 horsepower out of it, that's enough. It's more than the 35 I was getting out of that little Kubota running it fast. And so this these guys over at Diesel Power Systems have several installs where they're running the 5.9 nice and slow, and the fuel consumption is great. And with an electronic governor, which this is not hooked up yet, but this is there's a control unit that I've got in there, and the linkage goes right here to the throttle. And so when it's under load and it doesn't maintain the speed based on the mag pickup right there, then the control unit will will fuel it more to maintain right at the 850 RPM or so. So anyway, this is a 12-inch that drive pulley, and there's an 8-inch driven pulley. So I spin the line shaft at 1200 RPM, and then from 1200, then I step up to go to 1800 for the generators, and I step down to go to about 700 for the air compressor. Okay, now I'm about to start it. So I'm using one of these Datacom controllers. They're only $60, but I've had really good success with them as long as you put a relay on each one of the circuits, like for fuel or crank or whatnot, because you can overload them, and I've blown some of them before just because it was there's a 10 amp rating on each one of those circuits. Anyway, so I'm happy with that. I'm not going to run the controller right now. I have a bypass manual circuit that's in this rat's nest in here. It's kind of like the baby only the mother can love, but it works and it all makes sense, and I've got all my circuits back there, a little tight, but anyway, that's what this is over here. So here goes nothing. Circulation pump's just kicked in, and I've got, let's see, yeah, the fuel is run, and probably some air bubbles, so it may not crank right away, but we'll see. Look at that. Never mind. Look, wow. Y'all, I can't believe it. Thing just cranked right up. First time. Good. All right. How about that? That is something else. I was just sitting there, just relaxed as can be. Yeah, I'll put it under load in a little bit. I don't want to, it's a brand new rebuild. It had the block machined. And so we're still in the process of seating the rings, and I need to do that under load. So But the fact that it does fire up is good, and yeah, something else. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you, Lord.